When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite. Obey your thirst.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
One of the most impactful conversations we released in 2025 was our time with Kurt Hester, featured on our sprint-based football podcast hosted by Tony Holler. Kurt was unique in the truest sense of the word. He was unapologetic in his approach, unfiltered in his honesty, and unwavering in his belief that athletes deserve better than tradition for tradition's sake. He didn't chase approval, trends, or numbers. He chased what actually worked. That clarity is what makes his loss so poignant. Kurt wasn't trying to fit into the profession as it existed. He was pushing it forward. Our sprint-based football podcast is presented by Titan Sports, a partner that shares that same commitment to clarity over guesswork. Titan helps coaches complete the picture of athlete performance by turning GPS data into clear, coach-ready feedback so staffs can manage workload, reinforce accountability, and know when players are truly ready to compete. In this conversation, Kurt challenges conventional thinking around strength training, conditioning, and athlete development. He explains why chasing numbers often fails to translate on the field, why speed and skill acquisition matter more than most programs admit, and why readiness should always outweigh volume. This conversation captures Kurt exactly as he was: direct, conviction-driven, deeply grounded in experience. Focus on doing right by players even when that meant pushing back against long-held norms. To preserve this and apply his thinking, we've also created the Coaching Coordinator AI Strength and Conditioning Insight Companion. This AI tool is built entirely from the 3 podcast episodes we recorded with Kurt, along with a full clinic presentation he delivered for our community. It's designed to help coaches revisit his ideas, ask better questions, and apply his principles within their own programs without speculation or outside interpretation. This episode is part of our Best of 2025 series, and here's our conversation with Tony Holler and Kurt Hester.
Everything is about the discipline of the drills that, make you better at your position. So it's a lot of individual drills, a lot of tackling drills that we do, a ton of our rugby tackling drills. And then we'll go to 7-on-7, we'll go to team. And then we can't throw a ball when you go 7-on-7 or team, but we just use a towel and they just stop at a certain distance. They'll blow the whistle, but you're moving to where you're supposed to be. So you're learning football. You're learning the system that you're going to play in. So you're not just doing obscure stuff. The only way you get better at football is play football. You can train all you want, but are you really getting better at football? Now, there are a lot of guys that I've seen in the combine who are some of the fastest guys at their position. And after 1 year, they're not even in the league because they were just fast, but they weren't very good football players.
Welcome to this episode of Sprint-Based Football, presented by Titan GPS. Founded and based in Texas, Titan GPS is your key to sprint-based football success. Designed specifically for high school football, Titan tracks the metrics that matter, like top speed, explosive acceleration, and even the powerful truck stick, speed times weight, for the ultimate performance insight. Whether it's optimizing practice, spotlighting players with 3D highlights, or giving recruiters verified in-game stats, Titan delivers. And with no minimums to get started, Titan walks you through every step. Message them on X @TitanSensor to learn more. Titan GPS, performance measured, potential unlocked. I'd like to welcome you to episode 9 of the Sprint Based Football Podcast. Today we have Kurt Hester. I'm so excited to have Kurt. He is one of the most outspoken S&C people in the nation. He works at the University of Houston, and I love his title, Head of Football Preparation. Can't wait for this. Hey, today we have Kurt Hester. What exactly is your title at the University of Houston?
Head of football preparation, because I think, strength and conditioning, that's like, from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, where it's just so succinct and like strength, you go to the weight room and then you go run guys into the ground. And so there's so many facets to get a football player, ready for sport. And there's so many facets by position to get a football player ready for sport. So I look at it more as we're preparing them for all the, the contacts of the game, the violence of the game. So I look at it as completely different than just being a strength and conditioning coach. Now, a lot of guys don't agree with me. They're like, oh, it is what it is. We're strength and conditioning coaches. I've never liked being like part of the crowd. Figured if I was part of the crowd, I was probably going to lose. And it wasn't good for my athletes. I wanted my athletes to progress farther. I want to do more things for my athletes. Like I do a lot of vision and cognition work with our guys. If you can't see and react to it, you're not good on the field. We do a lot of martial arts. We do a lot of pre-contact work. Like I spent time in Australia working with Rugby League. And when I was in New Orleans at Tulane with our New Orleans Gold, and here in Houston with our SaberCats. So tackling is a skill, and you will cut down dramatically on head injuries if you tackle year round. Now it doesn't have to be as violent. It's just skilled work with pads. Rugby athletes do it year round, and it's safe. They're the best tacklers in the world. So I think it's just more of a multifaceted position than just being a strength and conditioning coach.
I love that, and I love your rebel talent, nature, and all that. And that's why, of course, we had you speak in Missouri, Festus, Missouri, at our track football consortium, because we say that only dead fish go with the current, and you have definitely flowed against the current. Now, you had one hell of a run at both Louisiana Tech and Tulane. Can you describe those years?
I love being at Tech for the main reasons there is nothing in Ruston, Louisiana. So these guys, it's 100% football year round, because unless you hunt and fish, which I do, which I was fine with it. But most of the players, all our guys from Atlanta, New Orleans, Dallas. So they would come in we'd work extra with, they come in for 45 minutes. We'll work extra on vision and cognition work. If your defensive lineman come in for 45 minutes later, we'll work on martial arts, and we could put in so much because we had the time to do it. And so, we went on a run where I think we won 8 straight bowl games. It was the longest bowl game streak in all of football at the time. Beat a bunch of Power 5 schools at the time. And we put more guys in the NFL in the group of 5 than any other group of 5 team in that time span. Coach Fritz hired me. Tulane, I'm from below New Orleans. So I graduated from Tulane. So it was like me, coming home. They were 2-10 the year before with a lot of injuries. It's one of the things I'm good at is keeping guys on the field. And then I'm really good at return to play, putting them back on the field. So we ended up 12-2, beating USC in the Cotton Bowl. And then the next year we were 11-3. And both times we were conference champions. One time we lost conference, but 12-2 and 11-3, which got us to Houston. And we're just rebuilding the program. We lost 62 players last year. We got there. It's a whole new era in football. But I still believe you can develop. If you get the right kids, they'll stay and you can develop them. And, only a few guys we developed them and we had such great relationships. Very few of them jumped in the portal. And if they did, they typically jumped right back out. I think we'll get that done at the University of Houston. 250 miles. There's like over 7 million people, 7 million people. Just in the Houston area, 7 million. We don't even have to get out of our backyard to recruit. We get a lot of guys coming back that went to really big schools and they, okay, this is not for me. I'm going to come back to the University of Houston where I'm from. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So you probably wrote one of the most famous books ever written by a guy in your field. What made you want to write that book?
I actually started, I didn't know what I was writing about. I just kind of started free writing. I'd get up at 4 a.m. when my mind was the clearest, and I would just kind of write, just free write, just whatever would come to my mind. And then it kind of, I come from a really long line of Methodist preachers, like from 1900 all the way. My great-grandfather was the first Methodist preacher in South Louisiana. He had his church burned down 3 times by Catholics because they kind of thought it was voodoo. South Louisiana is all Catholic. So it's like, what is this Protestant stuff? What is this Methodist stuff? And he was Cajun French. He learned how to read English and speak English on the Bible. So, but he thought he was Methodist. And so when I'm writing it, I just had this vision of, okay, I'm going to write like a passage of something that happened. And then underneath it, put like the date, like Curticus 1/12/19, like when it happened. And then write about what that passage. So I'd write some crazy passage and then write about, why I wrote that passage. And my mom's actually an ordained preacher too. And I was like, Ashley, I said, look, read this. Is this sacrilegious? And she's like, she goes, not really, but the way you speak, you say exactly how you talk. And, there's some, I'll throw in whatever, if I thought it and that's how it came out, that's what I wrote. And so even like the copyright infringement, is like the most famous copyright infringement in the world, because, and most people, and I only had like 10 people, email me like, dude, that copyright infringement is unbelievable. But the reason why I could write it was we had one of our running backs, really talented running back. He ended up with Hodgkin's disease. And St. Jude's, he was actually a little too old to go to St. Jude's. And they took him anyway. And they healed him. He came back and played. And then I worked with a lot of special ops guys. Some of the guys from SEAL Team 10 trained him, into buds and stuff. And they were from South Louisiana. And they would come back whenever they were, back in the States, come back and work with me, with our players. So I felt, like, okay, I can write this book and kind of say what I want to say about administration, say what I want to say about sport coaches, say what I want to say about the medical field. And if you fire me, you hate sick children and you hate America. And so being in Ruston, Louisiana was like probably the only place where, even Skip Holtz, my head coach, he's like, and people would ask him, did you read Kurt's book? He's like, hell no. Plausible deniability. I will not read his book until I quit college football, because he knew the stuff I was, and but one of the some of the best compliments, Carl Malone, who played at Louisiana Tech, he read my book. He thought it was the funniest book he ever read. So, and which shocked me because I was kind of hesitant. Like when you write something like that, and it's kind of personal, and you hit enter to get it published, I'm thinking in my head, okay, when I hit this, there's going to be a lot of repercussions. And it took me like 10 seconds, and I just went F it, hit it. And then I've never had one person say anything negative about it, which shocks me.
Wow. I have a book that I have an advance for. I thought it was done. It got edited. I didn't like the edits. And now I'm super busy. And so I'm going to rewrite parts of it this summer. But it's one of the scariest things ever to push that button and say, I'm ready. Because, the twin thieves, as Steve Jones talks about, the fear of failure and the fear of judgment. No matter how big and bad you are, you'd rather people not come after you, but the amount of courage that it takes, I think, is very underrated.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was like, is it, I'd always, is it good enough? Do I need to put more in? And Ryan Grubbs was my assistant at the time. And Ryan goes, dude, just hit enter. You're going to be the Donald Trump of strength and conditioning. Don't worry about it. And like I'd write a page and hand it to Ryan. He would just die laughing. He goes, oh yeah, you got to keep that in there. Because I say, you think this is too strong? He's like, no, it's perfect.
I got that Ryan Grubbs and you were close because Ryan has sat on my patio before. We're friends from way back from, I guess, right before he got to Purdue, we started communicating, and he's spoken at TFCs and all that kind of stuff. So he's in Houston now too, right?
He lives in my neighborhood. He's with the Texans. Yeah, we live right down the road from each other.
Yeah, and Matt Van Dyke is another friend of ours.
Yeah.
That's great stuff. Let's throw out some words. You mentioned health and recovery, and I think the Sprint Based podcast is very much about that. That if you practice in a smarter way, if you don't run them into the ground, if you prepare them for the specific needs of football, you're going to have a much healthier team at the end of the year. Talk to me about the health of a football team and the importance and the particulars about keeping a team healthy.
Well, I mean, when I was at my last year at Tech, I decided to do verticals 3 times a week during camp. So we tracked it all the way through camp, and we looked at, by the time we got through camp, it was we were at a minus 4.5, 5 inches per athlete in vertical. So we knew, okay, they're super fatigued coming out of camp. Their power output's down, their speed's going to be down, their fatigue level's really high, the chance of injury is going to be really high because their fatigue is so high. And in my head, I was like, the reason why no one ever notices this is because everyone does it. Every football coach in college just beats a team down in camp, so that they bond, so that, thinking, okay, we're going to be ready for the first game. And you're really not. but nor are the other teams either. So it's kind of like you're on equal ground. And it took us about 4 to 5 weeks because you're coming out of camp, so you're exponentially loading your athletes. You're not super aggressive. You're progressively loading them. And once we got their strength back up a little bit, then we it kind of leveled off after 5 weeks. So I looked at it as, okay, what if we were not fatigued coming out of camp? We would have a 5-week window where we're faster than everybody else before they ever recovered. I showed when on my interview with Coach Fritz, interview at Tulane, I showed him that. And he's a data guy. Like I can't come up with enough data for him. And it kind of drives me nuts because it's like most of it I don't use, but I'm recording all this stuff. And I think he does it because he knows it annoys me. I think he just likes to get into my skin, but he loves it. He's like, so we tracked it at Tulane. Same thing. So right now Monday will be our second week of spring ball, and we lift on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we track it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We want to see in conjunction with our catapult if, our guys are going to recover, even though we don't have any games. We just want to see, are we doing spring ball right so that our guys aren't so fatigued. They start ACLs, high ankles, MCLs, PCLs, meniscus tears. You have it. Those are some things that are easy to track with a jump mat, and so you just beginning of a workout, go ahead and jump 3 times and you're good. So I think that is one of the, the better things you can do for your team. And just the way we cycle practice, with heavy periods followed by almost like a walkthrough, more of a jog through, and then back to a heavy, and we do that, all the way through practice. Program practice the way we need to program practice so the athletes can recover. So they're not, just shot after 3 periods of individual going, 100%. At the beginning of practice. There are a lot of different things you can do, but most football coaches aren't going to listen to you.
Right.
Yeah.
There's several things I want to jump in on here. I love the fact that if everybody does it, that it really does not expose people doing it wrong. One of my things is that dumb is undefeated against dumber. And I think in football, we have a tendency to everybody just copies everybody else. And everybody's dumb. You mentioned that players that are fatigued are going to get hurt. I've talked a lot with Zach Dakin at TCU, and he really believes through his GPS data that the load that a guy goes through, you can almost draw a direct line between that and injury. And it's all kinds of injuries.
Yeah, I predicted one of our running backs, he was our big back. And I kept telling him, look, man, this guy's load is out the roof. And I was backing off in the weight room. I was trying to do recovery stuff with him. He blew his ACL out the next day. And for 3 days, I was like, look, man, and it was just like he just cut. Boom. And it was just, he was now, And so there's a couple of not severe hamstring pulls, but some hamstring strains. It would take me a week to 6 days to get him back on the field that we predicted. We said, look, man, y'all got to take him out. Because for me, it's like, get him out of individual drills. Save him for team. Save him for team. Team is where you get really better at playing the game. So do you want to burn him out with all and a lot of times they're not the best individual drills to help you by that position. It's just kind of like filler time. So would you rather do some filler time with him on a drill that really doesn't help him in his position? Or do you want to have him fresh for team? And so we got a staff, now, the problem is now, at our level is your staff changes so much. So once you get guys believing in what you're saying and trusting you, they're gone. And then, and they've been on some bad staffs with idiots as strength coaches who have 30 surgeries. Literally, there's some P4 teams, 30 surgeries a year.
30 surgeries a year.
Oh, yeah, easily. And it's like, and I'm not going to say who, but they're supposedly the best guys in the country. And they're really just monkeys who yell and scream all the time and have zero brain. And so, it's kind of like the portal. It's like a coach's portal. So every year we got to start over. We got to convince the coaches that we know what we're talking about. Now the coaches on staff will tell the new coaches, look, listen to Kurt and my sports scientist, Ben Morcott, listen to Ben. And when he tells you to back off on a guy, pull him and put a walk on in and let him run a bunch of routes. So it's just on communication, developing that rapport with all the new coaches. And, Coach Fritz is still old school. I'm talking about 100% old school because he's won national championships everywhere he's been. And he'll still equate winning, in spite of. He hates when I say it. And, you had great talent. You had great talent. Y'all called the right plays at the right time, and y'all stayed relatively healthy. I said, but this is a new era of football. Like I played, in an era where man, you ran the ball 80% of the time. So on defense, I'm a safety. I'm standing on the line of scrimmage, and you just bang people. So you never really got top speed because you're just banging into people the whole game. This is a 7-on-7 league now, especially the Big 12. It is just wide open, 7-on-7. Best athlete, wins. So it's a whole different mindset of football. And you've got to start listening to the science to a certain extent.
And coaches are typically they don't really think like you do, right? I mean, aren't most of them just really hard-headed and like copy shit from like 40 years ago?
It sort of, to a certain extent. Like he'll get on me. Sometimes he'll go, Kurt, I've never had this short of practice ever. At this point in time, and I was like, and I knew what he was saying is, we better win. We better win this week. And I'll put my neck on the line. I'll tie the rope around my neck. I don't care. I'd rather, and I told him, I said, Coach, my job is to give you the best information possible. You do it with it what you will. But I'm not going to sit here and be a do-boy. I'm going to tell you what I think. You can hand my ass to me. I don't care. And a lot of times he'll do it. But then he'll come back the next day and go, I think we need to do this. And I'm like, that's what I said yesterday. But it had to, it had to be his idea. And because he'd go home and think about it and go, I think he has a point. Never did speed work during the season before practice. And I said, look, we need to do this. And that was one of the things he went, whatever you need, how many periods you need. And I said, let's warm up, give me a few periods. We'll hit a couple of max velo, and it'll be different for the linemen than the rest of the guys, different yardages. We'll do a few pogos and plyometrics while we're warming up before we go get on the line. We'll hit 2 or 3 max, and we're done. And, we had like 41 guys. We played BYU last game of the season. I mean, we were having a terrible season, and they're ranked really high. They're trying to get to conference championship. It was a night game, 9:00 at night, their time. We're coming from Central Time. It was like, 18, 16 degrees maybe. And, all our guys are from the South, going, oh, this sucks. Yeah, it's so cold here. And we were with them the whole time. I mean, it was like 24-18 all the way to the end of the game. We were driving, and our quarterback slid 5 yards before the first down, which was like a knucklehead move. But when we looked at the data, we had 41 guys over 95% max velo in the game. And I was like, okay, well, we did a good job. We did a really good job of keeping our velocity up the entire year.
Obviously, that's one of my I love talking speed. Buddy Morris, I had the great quote that I use in all my presentations that we're going to train our skill guys like Olympic sprinters, and we're going to train our bigs like hammer throwers, but all of them are going to get exposed to max velocity.
It's just different for a big guy. Max velocity is going to come a whole lot faster. He's 330 pounds, so it's not. Yes. He doesn't even need 30 yards. So max velocity is like 20 for him.
Yeah, I tell people that for me to get up to, at the age of 66, I can hit max velocity in about 3 steps. It just doesn't take as long if your ceiling is lower. But there are so many, and we're trying to coach coaches here. There are so many high school coaches where I see their offensive line, they look like they're going to go play D1 football. But when you really explore what they're doing with those kids, they're lifting a lot, eating a lot, working them hard, and they're never, ever sprinting, ever. They haven't ever been exposed to movement stuff. And I think that's especially bad for 16 and 17-year-olds, that they aren't even close to their genetic ceiling of speed. And you probably see some of that even at the college level.
Well, yeah, it's insane that when we get guys from these schools that are ranked higher than us, and they come in, I'm like, did y'all even train? You were there 3 years. Are you kidding me? And 1 year with us, and you're like, Coach, thank God I came here. This is like a completely different world. I'm going to backtrack about Buddy Morris. That's where I got football preparation from. That's what he said. That's what he calls. That's what he calls it. But the game is played on the field. The game's in movement. You can't, like we talk about, the health and safety of athletes. If they're not strong enough to decelerate, if they're not strong enough to change a direction, agility off of movement, if they don't hit top end speeds, which I think is basically inoculation for hamstring pulls, because if you don't get the top end speed ever, when you got a gunner or someone breaks, a long run and a 60-yard run, he does finally get to his top end speed. Typically, a lot of times they'll pull. I tell people like, okay, you get all these guys who are like played college football. They don't do a whole lot for like 5 years. So now they're like 28, 29, 30. They decide to go play in a flag football league. They haven't sprinted in 5 or 6 years. The first thing they do in the first game is pull a hamstring because they haven't been at a top speed for 5 years. So it's just an inoculation for hamstring injuries. I think people do take it too far with numbers. I think it's like the understanding of GPS. Like if someone hits 21, that's fast. I think 21's really fast. Just like I think a 4.5 is fast, and people, they knock a 4.5. And there are a lot of, the average DB and receiver in the combines are 4.5. And they're supposed to be the top guys in the country, and I think athletes have been lied to, with personal trainers and even their coaches. If their coach loves them, they have a fast time. And if the coaches don't like them, they don't have a fast time. And so I think, you're only hitting that top end speed, might be 1 or 2 strides. Yes, it needs to be done, but I think it's gotten so prevalent on social media. I see guys like in personal trainers, I had like 12-year-old hit 23 miles an hour, 24 miles an hour. And I'm going, yeah, shut up. There's no way in hell. You had a 12-year-old that run, and I got some of the fastest guys in the state of Texas, and they're running 21.7s. So that, it's just so people are trying to get like, clicks and notoriety, and they'll put on like, one, when I was at Tulane, I forgot who it was, but we had 65 guys hit 22 plus miles an hour this week in training. And I'm going, man, we might have 4 guys that can hit 22. And New Orleans has some fast dudes.
Also, it's really hard to compare times. Obviously, in the 40-yard dash, you can't compare it all because was there wind? Was there no wind? What kind of surface you have? What kind of timing system? But even with miles per hour, it is totally different hitting miles per hour on a soft surface in a football sense.
Yeah.
My fastest guy, Marcellus Moore, just won the Milrose games like last month. So he's like legit professional track level sprinter. And as the fastest guy ever coached, he hit 24.3 once. That's really fast, but he was in shorts, spikes, hard track. And that's the only guy that's ever hit 24 for me, ever. So if somebody runs in spikes on a track, that's not the same as hitting 21. Like when you look at like an NFL player like DK Metcalf, who I think is the last guy to hit 22.6 or something in a game, he could hit 25 in spikes on a track. So a lot of that depends on how you do things.
Yeah.
But I love the idea that you mentioned how speed is healthy. I asked Kyle Bolton when he was at TCU, when it came out that they were playing for the national championship and they were speed training during the week. I asked him, how come you speed train? And I thought it was because we want to be the fastest, most athletic version of ourselves when we go to the bowl game. Well, he said health. And I think there are some interesting global things about health, the healthy pursuit of speed that makes for a healthy team. And when you combine that with more intelligent loading, I think the two things really go together.
I think too, is like, look at, the game of football is so acceleration based that it's like how, in my mind, I might be wrong, but I look at it as how fast can I get them to about 95%? Like how, the yardage can, if it's 15 yards, it's 20, how fast can I get them to close to their top speed? And I think that, yes, we need longer distances to get to those top speeds, but I also want to work on trying to get them to top speed faster because the play doesn't last that long. And the guys that can hit the hole faster, the guys who can scrape, get through the line, the guys who can turn their hips and cover faster, they're going to be better players, but they have to be able to accelerate and have a lot of force into the ground to be able to move their bodies to be able to do it. And, deceleration is a very important part of staying healthy. A lot of your injuries come through deceleration. And the thing is, you're always in movement. Like me and Dan Path will argue a lot about this as like mechanic drills. And I'm like, Dan, like when you're playing, either you have a ball in your hand or you're looking at another athlete and your center of gravity is rising and lowering depending on the athlete in front of you. And I said, so your body, your hands, your arm, you're all over the place. Your feet could be spread out, and so, for me, I'll do mechanic drills as like really part of the warm up, but not really until I get to the dumbass training of pro day and the combine, which, is like, has nothing to do with football. That's when I'll start really working mechanics. But the game is a lot different than just straight line speed. If you're just worried about max velo, you're going to get your guys killed. You need it. It's necessary, but it can't be the one thing where you're like, okay, this is all I care about, and this is all I'm going to post. Like when I said that, I had whatever college, like we had 66 guys hit 22 miles an hour today, and it was on grass. And we do a lot of mouth tape work, breathing, like, tape our mouths while we're training. And we were doing some acceleration work, and I took a picture of one of our guys coming out of acceleration, had tape on. We had 36 linemen hit 38 miles an hour today, and, so just making fun of it, like how ludicrous, those numbers are. And yes, it's when you look at GPS systems are different, and they try, like McLeod tries to tell me it's not. And I'm like, it is. McLeod runs fast. Stat Sports runs fast compared to Catapult. Then if you're timing on Broward or just a timing system and just extrapolating the miles per hour, it's 100% different. And then the fact that it's a satellite, period, on any GPS, 4 billion miles up in the air. And I tweeted about this. It's not God. It's not God handing down times. And like we have some times where our units register 0, and so when we look at the time, so say a kid hits 21.3, then the next week he hits like 21.6, and then 21.7. Then he's progressing, and then finally hits a 22. That's when I go, okay, that's a true 22. But if a kid's like a 21.1 and all of a sudden he hits a 22 in the same yardage, I'm going, we pull that out. We throw that. We just throw it away because I don't believe it. He lurched real hard, and that's what got it up. Like towards the end, like, they'll try and like the track, if you lurch real fast, it'll speed up. If you dive, like you dive for a football, man, it really freaking goes haywire. So, I'm very, when I look at things, I don't trust a lot of stuff. So, I'm very pragmatic about, my ego, I could care less what I post. I work for my guys. I tell them that I work for you, and so, I'm not going to throw out numbers that are dumb. If the scouts trust me, because I'll tell them where a kid's at. And like, they'll tell me about certain schools. Oh yeah. This kid's supposed to have a 500 bench. They go there, and then he gets to the combine, he benches 225 3 times, this guy's supposed to be a 4.3 guy, and he ran a 4.7. And I show them, their stats. This is where the kid is. And I had a linebacker who ran a 4.51, and we thought we could push a 4.9. That was our goal. And he was right there. And I told the scouts, I said, look, he's going to push a 4.9, and we were right there. And, but, he was a 10.2 broad jumper. His drills were like fastest at the Big 12, combine for linebackers, so, there's my linemen the same way, the ones that stayed and trained with me outperformed anybody who left and went anywhere else, because whenever they go somewhere else, to me, it's personal. So I'll make sure the guys that stay home outperform everybody.
There you go.
And they did.
We're talking about the healthy aspect of sprinting, and it's in low doses. I love what Tony Villani says, that speed work might be the priority, but it's far from being the majority. You get a lot back from a very little investment. Obviously, the weight room can keep you healthy. I also think weird things in the weight room can make you unhealthy. But I want to mention, you talked about change of direction and being able to decelerate. As a track coach, I have found that basketball players are the healthiest track athletes that I have. And I think it's because of the change of direction, the deceleration, and the multi-directional stuff that they do, that somehow force absorption is one of those things, kind of like speed, that when you do it a lot, you will become healthier. Is that kind of what you see too?
Yeah, and you got to look at too, is like, you talked about like in a game with, equipment on, like Tyreek Hill, the fastest he ran at 60 yards was 21.7. Well, yeah, I've always had coaches and even Coach Fritz to this day, Kurt, you can do whatever you want with athletes. You'll never get them ready to play the game. Condition wise, the game is practice is completely different. And I always thought, and a lot of coaches have told me that, and I've always thought, yeah, you're wrong. I didn't get in this field to someone to tell me that I can't get something done, which is I'm going to get it done, especially if you tell me I can't get it done. So what I did was, when I was at Tulane, when he told me that, I grabbed all the linemen's equipment. I'm talking about their braces, socks, cleats, everything they put on. And I soaked it because South Louisiana, it's Africa hot. So, I mean, it's 100% humidity. You're breathing straight water. Put it on a scale and it was like 17 pounds, 17, 18 pounds. So I was like, okay. Then I did the mids and it was like a little bit lighter. And then the skill guys was like 12, 13 because they don't wear anything now. But it's still a load. And it's still a load they're not used to. We start like the last 3 weeks of the summer and the last 3 weeks before spring ball, and I'll switch days with it. And we start out slowly adding weight to vest. So even with our deceleration work, because you got to get used to handling the load. Even our top velocity work, you got to get used to handling that load at top max velo. So progressing through with heavier loads, we were able to decelerate a lot faster, and we're stronger at it. We can come to a stop and re-accelerate faster. They could still, as we progress in time, their max velocities dropped, but then as they got stronger, it picked up because we're also doing some really heavy loaded acceleration work. So that was kind of helping out with it. But then our conditioning level was increased. And then when they go to put their pads on, I mean, you think about, I'm a lineman, I'm holding a 25-pound plate in my hands while I'm running around. That tends to wear you out. So we found that we're in better condition. Our athletes are better. They can handle top end speed more. If you slowly progress, we don't throw 30-pound vest on them right off the bat. I mean, we start out with like 2.5 pounds, then 5, and then 7.5, and then 10, and then 12, and then, 12.5. And then the big guys, we work our way up to 20 pounds and then work backwards with our mids and our skill. So I might be wrong, but it seems to work right now.
Love it. We were talking right before we got on about how football coaches have fallen in love with doing hard things that may not translate to anything on the field. And I mentioned that I've read that high school sports were totally changed after World War II because the men that came home basically had formed these incredible bonds with other men going through really hard things. And when men go through hard things as a group, they become closer. And so they wanted something for their own boys, high school sports, where things could be really hard. And by going through hard things without being shot at, they would survive. But I think that doing hard things just to, for team building and stuff has become such a feature of football that it possibly is overdone at this time. And you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote an article for Simply Faster a couple of years ago, the death of the mat drills. And a lot of people were like pissed off, like, mat drills, why we won district championship in high school, mat drills, why we won the conference championship in college. I'm going, yeah, well then why didn't, if everybody did mat drills, why wouldn't everybody win the conference championship? Or why wouldn't everybody win the district championship?
Some people might not know what mat drills are. I mean, obviously we do, but explain.
Yeah. It's usually like six to 8 stations of just obscure drills that have nothing to do with, a lot of the movements that you do in your skill, on the field. So the way I look at it is 10% of the guys of your players. I mean, that's who they are. They're super high driven. They love beating themselves down. That's like fun to them. Then you got 10% who could care less. They're the ones that are never going to do the drill right. So everybody's got to do it over again. They're soft mentally. Most of them don't even want to play football. Some of them are the best athletes on the team, and they're just like, I don't want to do this. Then your mid 80%, for the most part, they're moving at a high level, but it's like, I'm just getting through this so I can play football. Now, do they bond a little bit, through it? To a certain extent, yes. The 10% of the bottom, no. And now, it's increased our condition. Well, the 10% at the top really increased their conditioning. The 80% in the middle got in better condition. The 10% of the bottom, they're the same. They got just a tiny, tiny bit, but they're the same guys they were when they walked on the field. So the way I look at it is like we do OTAs, just like the NFL. So I have to rearrange our workouts from a 4-day a week to when we start OTAs when the coaches are involved. So we lift Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I do max velocity on Monday. We do acceleration on Thursday before the OTA. And I use the OTAs as agility because we're doing a ton of change of direction. And then we'll come back on Friday. We do a lot of loaded work at lower speeds, but in different vectors and planes so that we're stronger in movement. Our hip flexors, our groins, our calves, we're a lot stronger in movement so we can handle the forces of deceleration and acceleration at a really high level. The way we cycle it through is discipline. So whatever drill we have, you're going to be perfect. Everybody's helmet on. First part of OTAs, no helmets, but everybody's got the jerseys. Everybody's dressed the right way. Every drill is done to perfection, or you do it over. The coaches are good. And then we look at the GPSs. If we need to accelerate, like do more reps per period, we tell them, look, like you need to pump up this period, or you need to back off on this period. But everything is about the discipline of the drills that make you better at your position. So it's a lot of individual drills, a lot of tackling drills that we do, a ton of our rugby tackling drills, and then we'll go to 7-on-7. We'll go to team, and then we can't throw a ball when you go 7-on-7 or team, but we just use a towel and they just stop at a certain distance. They'll blow the whistle, but you're moving to where you're supposed to be. So you're learning football. You're learning you're learning the system that you're gonna play in. So you're not just doing obscure stuff. The only way you get better at football is to play football. You can train all you want, but are you really getting better at football? There are a lot of guys that I've seen in the combine who are some of the fastest guys at their position. And after 1 year, they're not even in the league because they were just fast, but they weren't very good football players. And so a team like the Raiders, who we're going to draft anybody who's fast, we don't care, if he can play football or not. Yeah, you have to be fast, but you also have to be a great football player. And that only comes through practice and discipline. And so as long as you have a high standard and you stick to it, you can make it really hard and they'll bond together.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that just the process of going through winning and losing and football itself, I just don't know why you have to have these artificial military type trips to crawl under barbed wire and shit like that. There's probably ways to get your team tough.
Well, I mean, even, the way I start workouts, I'll start with RPR, and then we do a lot of what I call hydraulics from the knee down. So we do, foot circles, wipers, rockers, ankle rockers, and then we do short foot, where feet flat, toes up, 15 yards and back. Then we'll do edge of our foot, 15 yards and back.
Are you barefoot? Are you barefoot?
I do everything barefoot.
I love it.
I do everything. I mean, I do the entire warm up. I try to keep them out of their cleats as much as I can. So then we go inside edge, then we go heel, and then we go grabs where they're grabbing the turf and they walk. And that's the first part of our warm up. Then we'll go to a neural aspect, whether usually it's both. Will be a cross crawl, 10 yards and back, and then infinity run. And so we'll hit the infinity run. Like we'll start teaching them walk to jog, and then we'll go jog to sprint.
Quick pause here to recognize the presenting partner of sprint-based football, Titan Sports. A big theme you're hearing in this conversation with Kurt is the difference between guessing and knowing, between chasing numbers and actually understanding readiness. That's where Titan fits. Titan's GPS athlete trackers take effort and turn it into clear visual feedback coaches can actually use. You can track workload, validate progress, and see when athletes are truly ready to compete, not just based on feel, not just based on tradition. When athletes know their work is being measured, behavior changes, accountability improves, and competition shows up. And with more than 150 metrics, staffs can enforce standards. guide recovery, and make better decisions across the week. Titan supports coaching. It doesn't replace it. The link to Titan can be found in the show notes.
Let's explain, because I know that, like Cal Dietz calls it the GOAT drill and stuff. Explain what you mean exactly for the people who haven't heard of the Infinity Run. I know it was a book from like 50 years ago.
I think it's Suncrest.
Yeah, something like that. And it's all about a way to fire up your brain, to get your brain.
Well, it links your left and right hemisphere. So basically it crosses over. So if you put electrodes, you see where they fire and you're getting cross connections and it just lights it up. So what that does is it increases your motor coordination. So what Dr. Suncrest found out, whereas like she sat like two chairs 5 yards apart and she sat in a chair in the middle, and her brain damage patients would just walk in a figure eight. Now, when they come around the turn, you spin your head to stare at the doctor sitting in the chair. So as I come around, I spin my head.
The eyes
as
never
I come
leave.
around,
The eyes never leave.
your eyes never. Your eyes never leave the doctor.
Yeah.
We use a big traffic cone, so your eyes never leave the traffic cone the entire time you're running. So you spin that head real fast. I like to do it with our receivers a lot of times right before warm-up, where we do it where we're in the middle, we throw balls to them. Like as they come around that turn that head, there's a ball coming right at them. And we drop less balls in practice when we do it. Cross-crawling does the same thing. It will just the motion of the spine, the hips, and the shoulder stabilization, you will get the same response. So that's why we'll do like in a warm-up, if we're not doing a lot of cross-crawling. Because I do a lot of cross-crawling as conditioning. Because it is conditioning. If you're going at slow speeds to stabilize the shoulders, or if you're going at fast speeds for getting that impact on the shoulders that you're going to get in football, it is definitely conditioning.
Now, Dan Fichter talks a lot about cross crawl. That's another thing I want you to kind of mention. Gosh, there's so many things. But before I go to that, the infinity thing, do you ever have people like moving a ball around their waist as they do it?
No, because I'm doing like my rows are like 15 and across. So we put 15 cones all the way down, and then we switch the cone each day. It'll be on the left side or it'll be on the right side of the field. So we're going lines of 15 at a time because I've got a whole offense or a whole defense. Okay, so then like I look at it as like when I'm on a 4-day-a-week, acceleration on Monday, Tuesday, I want some low intensity running, so I do some neural stuff. Same principle, but in a different manner, where I'll do a big curve, like from the goal line, maybe 5 yards in to the 30, and then 5 yards in on the goal line. So it's a big, big curve. And then we'll do like 2 yards outside the numbers with cones, and we do a serpentine run. And then we'll do a run across. Now we'll do sometimes nothing in your hands, and sometimes where you're running and you stare at a punch, turn your head, punch, but you still have a focal point. So all three drills, like we're in a stadium, so it could be a sign, it could be the goalpost. You have a focal point that you're staring at in that run. And you're running about 65, 70%. We do a few, 4 reps per position, maybe work our way up to 7 or 8 max, because I want something lower intensity because I'm going to take Wednesday off. I'm going to do max velo on Thursday. So I think I'm getting some neural responses with it. I struggle with this where it's added volume is wasted energy, but I think it has some value to a certain. I don't go crazy on the intensity, and I don't crazy on the reps.
Explain what the cross crawl looks like.
Now, it's not your typical bear crawl that you did, for punishment. Your back is flat. Your knees are at a 90. Okay. So when you're going forward, you have to have long strides with your hands to keep your butt from coming up. So to stay flat. If you're going backwards, you have to have long strides with your legs to keep you from coming up too high. So there's a technique behind it. And, we'll do forward, backwards. We'll do lateral. We'll do like your old school crab crawl. And we'll do 2 legs, 1 arm, 2 arms, 1 leg. There's a lot of different variations, and there's a different speeds because a different speed is going to elicit a different response. So yes, you're getting the neural response, but at slower speeds, it's more hip mobility and shoulder strengthening and stability. At a higher speed, linemen have always told me like the first week of spring ball, the first week of camp, their shoulders kill them from the impact of punching with a 300-pound guy coming at them. So it's just part of our pre-contact work. Because it's you're going fast. There's that shoulder stabbing hard. So, it's like you're punching somebody, but you're just driving into the turf. So it gets their shoulders used to impact, and then they have no issues at all. And we do a lot of stuff in the weight room too, like almost like a depth jump to a stab push up to stabilize shoulders and a bunch of other different things. But it doesn't. They have no problems with shoulder pain at all in camp or during the season, and we keep it up throughout the year. So there's 2 different modalities that you're working with, and you look at and distance too, because I'm working strength and I'm working impact. So like sometimes like when we start 10 to 15 yards is murder for especially the big guys. Like they're dying, and they're just falling all over the place. But then after 3 to 4 weeks, the conditioning level just goes out the roof. And we'll do that after whatever we do that I consider conditioning. on a Friday. That's our Friday workout. So I don't do 300-yard shuttles. I don't do gassers. What we do is it kind of by position, and we go, by series. And so we have a call sheet, and we break up. Tsunami is my big guys. My mids are Thunder. My little guys are Lightning. So we split up we're on three different, we're on their field, but, Thunder's in the middle, Tsunami's on this end, Lightning's on this end. And we all have a different call sheet because of the different yardages that typically they run in a game. So we stay at, 35 seconds rest, a play clock. We change the rest interval of them going off the field. So it might be 3 minutes, it might be 7 minutes. We change the rest interval of them sitting on the bench. And we also change the distance, the distance that they're going and the reps. So they might hit 5 yards and back, 35 seconds rest. All right, now you're going to hit 15 and back. Okay, now you're going to go back 10 and back. Oh, boom, 3 plays, we were out, hit the sidelines. 3-minute rest, come back. And we're, the linemen aren't running as far as the Thunder. Thunder's not running as far as Lightning. But it's still a call sheet. And we have a lot of we try to make it literally like the game. You play for 4 hours. If you can't run, if you're not in shape to play in a 4-hour game where you got the little dude with the red shirt on with his freaking clock driving you nuts, his 4-minute, 5-minute clock for commercials, then you shouldn't be playing college football. You're a terrible athlete. So I don't mind spending more time on the field to get that done to where we're kind of, at least it's not as glycolytic because there's so much more rest, but we're getting some of the volume that we're going to have in practice because that's the load they're going to have in practice. No matter what I say, the load's going to be the load.
You're doing it at a performance level too, right? You're not doing it like a sloppy third gear BS level.
No, it's touch the line, come back, you screw up. I mean, the discipline's still high. And the players, they get on. I mean, if there's no effort in it, and it's time too. Like depending on the group and the distance, it's a different time. So they still have to make the time. But sometimes there's a 3-minute rest, sometimes there's a 4-minute rest, sometimes a 1-minute rest. It's like, okay, went to the field, interception, get back out there. But we spend, I don't, like most strength coaches, they want a condition where it's like, okay, 16 110s, 45 seconds down, 15 seconds down, 45 seconds rest. We can do this in 15 minutes and we can go back inside because it's hot. They just want to run them and then done. I don't care what time it is. I'll spend, even with like a regular training session, our Lightning group is out there, is on the field over 60% of the time and only 40% in the weight room. Now, our Tsunami guys are different. 40% on the field because their yardages are so short, you can do a full workout. They're not going far. And then 60% because they have to have absolute strength and power in the weight room. So it's a different, we train them completely different.
I have one more question. The weight room. There's so many, in Illinois, for example, we are not required to have an S&C certified weight room guy. Usually it's a football coach. And you can imagine, they get in there and it's kind of they just kind of copied somebody else's lifting stuff. You're a pretty good simplifier. What things would you tell, let's say it's a first year coach and, oh, by the way, you're going to run the weight room stuff in the summer. What things would you tell that first year coach they need to be doing and need to not be doing?
I mean, basic exercise, pull-ups. Most high school kids can't do a pull-up or push-up, a real one. So basic exercises like that, I think, just from a mobility standpoint, and you can see, if you're looking, you can see defects in an overhead squat, like with the Achilles or their hips and or their shoulder, T-spine mobility. So I like them to be able to, the overhead squat. I think we destroy young athletes' CNS by these insane loads in high school. And there's scientific fact where they show they never recover. You go to, where they show that, okay, they're hitting, loads. Like I saw one kid, he had like a 700-pound squat max, and he was like 16 years old. And, the load on the spine, and we're seeing more and more, especially linemen with spinal issues when they come in, like freshmen with, usually two bulging discs. I mean, because they don't teach squatting technically enough. Some of them aren't mobile enough to squat, so they don't sit down. Okay, now we got to go through like a squat therapy program for them and like really regress and get them right. But I think just basic exercises executed well, like a basic pull up, a basic row, a basic, hinge. I'd rather Zercher or front squat an athlete than back squat because it doesn't load the spine and they can get into depth better with the young athletes. It's easier with the younger athletes. Teach them how to properly bench. And that's really all you need.
You chase numbers. Like our weight room at Plainfield North High School has, the top 10 squats, the top 10 bench press, like those are the things. And I've heard high school coaches say, well, my kids aren't really strong enough that we could hurt them, so really we can chase numbers because they're just teenagers. But you wouldn't agree with that.
No, because I think because of the damage you do. I mean, I think you between that 76 and 83%, you get better strength gains than 85 to that 100, whatever they try to load their bodies up to. And they'll be more technically proficient. They'll still get strong as hell. Like we did a cycle in January, like I can get our athletes as strong as I need them in 3 weeks. And most strength coaches, they whine about, we don't have enough time. I'm like, well, because you're a fucking idiot. You don't know shit. We did an eccentric cycle. First week, 75% on back squat. Second week, 80%. Third week, 85. We had like a 35% increase on our squat maxes week 4. I don't need anything else. There's a such thing as people say, oh, you can never be too strong. Yes, you can if it inhibits all other facets of training. If it inhibits your power, if it inhibits your speed, if it inhibits your acceleration. And they're like, no, it doesn't. I said, find me a literature that says it doesn't. Because my springy athletes, my lightning guys, you can see it wear all like heavy squatting because they're springy guys. That is like torture to them. Now we do some isolateral work and do some eccentric work, with some split stance type stuff. And they handle it really well. Bilateral stuff, they don't. And we have progressively gotten our guys faster. We've done a first year. It's kind of hard. You don't know anybody. I was more comfortable this year with our athletes and the athletes we had coming in. So I was more aggressive. So we got so much farther in everything we did. And what we did was, I'm not going to say we microdose stuff because it wasn't microdose, but we weren't spending this insane amount of time in the weight room just bashing them into the ground. We did a lot of complex type stuff and and we just got in and out and we were, our guys were telling the coaches, I PR'd and everything we did, and I was like, perfect. But we, on the field, we got an exorbitant amount of work done on the field because you play on the field. But hamstrings, like even Nordic, like everybody's like, oh, you got to have a Nord board. You have, when I look at stuff like that, I look at a company, they're selling something. So I don't look at all their data because their data is going to be pretty skewed because they're trying to sell it to you. Like a Nord board for me, I utilize that with athletes coming off an injury to see the differential and trying to get it within 5-6%. And no human's going to be perfectly symmetrical. It doesn't happen, but you want to get it down. So that's the only thing I think we do. We're a lot of college strength coaches and high school. We do Nordics too excessively. I think it tears up hamstring fibers a lot, especially if you're really good at it and you're really eccentrically slow. And I think if you sprint 1 or 2 days after, you're going to put yourself in a bad situation.
Yeah. And that's so crazy. They do the Nordics to bulletproof them. And what you're saying is it may actually cause the injury.
Well, I mean, if you look at rugby and soccer and all, and they're super believing it, and they still have a ton of hamstring injuries. So it's like there is no magic bullet. There is no magic bullet. I don't care who you are, So I think like a loaded sled and it's basically, I call it heel walk, but it really looks like a prime time. But I'm prime timing. I got a 45-pound plate on a sled, and I'm driving my heel down into the ground. And I'm doing it for 20 yards. And when that heel strikes, that hamstring goes with every strike. And it gets that low. So when that foot hits that ground, you pull forward, it's used to a high stress load.
So you're pulling a sled, how heavy?
Usually around it's probably 30%, 35% of their body weight. And I usually go 20 yards, like no more than 4 reps. and I'm striking the ground, and they're like, Coach, when I strike, I feel it. Dan showed me when he was at the University of Florida. I spent a week with him up there a long time ago, and he would have his athletes do prime time on their heels. And I'm looking at it, and so I did it, and I was like, oh, God. Your hamstring, it just lights your hamstring up. It actually, the ground, I think it mimics more of the ground forces that you're going to have at top end speed. And that's the problem I have with like people who are so into VBT is I don't care what you do, you are not going to come close to having the force reduction in the weight room that you do when you sprint at top speed. And it's they're selling you a bunch of bullshit. And now what it is good, it is a good barometer of fatigue where if you're in speed strength or strength speed, where you have to stay within that range, and you're at this percentage, but you can't. You're too tired. You drop it down to stay in that range, or I'm feeling really good. I can add a little bit more weight and stay and be in the range. I think that it has its value there, especially in season. But you're not. I don't care what you do in the weight room. It ain't happening. Now, there's certain things you can do to strengthen the groin, to strengthen the hamstrings, to strengthen the hip flexors, isometrically, ballistically, concentrically, eccentrically. Will help with speed better than squatting 800 pounds. But it's strength coaches just believe in the weight room because that's where they love to lift. Man, I grew up lifting. I grew up in the 80s, bodybuilding. Arnold Schwarzenegger was my dude. And then, Gail Hatch had an Olympic Training Center in Baton Rouge, started Olympic lifting. People have a misnomer that I don't like the weight room. I train 6 days a week. I mean, I love to train, but I'm not married to any lift, even though I come from that background. There are a lot of, guys that were like at LSU and then at Alabama. And they talk about the Gail Hatch system where they never trained with them. They would go watch. I'm on his board, on his Hall of Fame board. So there's a big difference in, me and, the guys who are like, oh, I'm a Hatch guy. You never got on the platform. I did. And I was the guy that would sit for an hour after training, just me, him in the office and talk about training. And we talk about the fourth quarter, Alabama, LSU, now Baylor, now, Tommy at A&M. At Miami, the fourth quarter. And I mean, Coach Hatch wrote that in the 90s. And I would sit there and go, Coach, if you're an Olympic lifter, that's awesome. But you have to look at how much time they're spent at practice, 7-on-7, how much sleep they're getting. They're in college, how much they're going out at night drinking, the stress of class, the stress of girls. You have to factor in all that stuff. And it can't just be about the lift. And that's back when no one did speed work in college. I think I might have been the first guy to do a dynamic warm-up in the history of college football in Tiger Stadium. And I could hear people yelling, what the hell is this bullshit they're doing on the field? Because I wouldn't sit them down. And this is 1994. I wouldn't sit them down on the field. We were just constant moving. And then we went right into individual. And things progress, and you have to look at things pragmatically. The thing is, like, training is an art for one thing, and you have to have a pretty good intuition, or someone's going to get hurt. And I'm by far the smart. I am not smart. I have to read things 100 times over, and I have to take a ton of notes. So I'm not saying I'm smarter than anybody else. I have good eyes, and that's one thing Dan Path said, Kurt, you have to develop your eyes. Have good eyes and have good intuition. And then if I'm not sure about something, I'm going to research the hell out of it. And then I'm going to try it myself. And I don't care. At 61, I can still run. I can still roll. At 60 years old, I ran a flying 10. I think it was a 115 with a 20-yard run in.
Good.
Yeah.
I thought I was done with my questions, but I got to go one more. My track coach background, a guy tweaks a hamstring. It's not, he may be out a week, he may be out 2 weeks, he may be out 3 weeks. Do you have anything special that you do with that guy?
Yeah, I start actually before we even go out there. I do a lot of flossing on the hamstring, so I restrict the blood flow.
Explain.
So you got it's a floss band. They're about 2 inches thick, then probably 5-6 feet long. And I'll wrap the hamstring from low to high, depending on where it's at, trying to push any swelling towards the heart. because you get it into the bloodstream, you just piss it out. That's where I'll start. Then I'll do some tempering, and not just rolling tempering. I'll take a 25 or 50 pound roller, depending on pain tolerance of the athlete. Like a receiver is not going to have the pain tolerance of a linebacker. So it'll be a different weight or a different size person. And I'll put it right on the knot and just hold it there for like 3 minutes. And that knot will slowly release. Then I'll rewrap it, and we'll do light RDLs. And we'll start day one, like the day after. We won't stretch it at all. I won't stretch it for like 72, maybe even longer hours. And then they immediately feel better. Then we'll go out to the field, and I'll do we'll start out with dribbles, like ankle. The ankle feels okay. We'll go to shin. If shin goes okay, we go to knee. If at some point one of them bothers it more than the other, we regress, and we just keep going. And we just keep going until we can get to knee. Then I'll set, the 6-inch micro hurdles at every yard, and we'll do basically an A run where it's all front side, and we'll slowly pick up speed. So we start moving right off the bat. It's like, that's the key to getting guys back on the field faster. Once they can press, get through that with no pain, we go to a ramp, and the parking garage is right next to our indoor. And it's about a 45-degree angle ramp. And because it's mostly quad, we'll start sprinting on the ramp. We'll sprint one time on the ramp. Then we'll go barefoot, and we'll do, A runs without the hurdles. We'll work our way up speed as they're comfortable, as they're pain tolerance. And then we just work right in it. Then we end up just working right through it. The last thing that, that's going to come is deceleration. So then once they get comfortable getting up to, 80%, then we start working on accelerating and deceleration. And then, a lot of times, if it's just a strain, 7 days they're back on the field. 6 days they're back on the field.
Now, I just had a question about the weight that you put on the knot. What are you using to put that weight on the?
It's Kabuki Strength, which I think they're going out of business, and Rogue is buying them out. It's called a pain pill. And so it's just a cylinder, and it's like cylinder, and it has a round edge on each side, but it has grooves like a Texas bar in the middle. So when you roll on the skin, it pulls the fascia away from the muscle. If you roll it, so then you get more blood flow. So then I'll turn it up this way and put it right on the knot and just hold it. One's 25 pounds, one's 50 pounds. And depending on the size, like I said, depending on the size of the athlete and the pain tolerance of the athlete, to release a hip flexor, the best tool I've ever used.
Wow.
My hip flexors are tight. I'll put them on the table and let their leg hang so it's stretched. Put that baby right on top of that hip flexor, and they're like, ah, and they just take it for about 2.5 minutes, and then they get up and they're like, coach, man, I'm so loose right now. It's unbelievable. I have them on the sidelines. Like, I'm working on guys, on the sidelines. I had a guy with a shoulder impingement where I'd get in between his pads and come down on his trap and stand up behind him on the bench to release his shoulder. So I feel like my job, I'm not a juice monkey. I'm not going to run up and down, wave towels. I'm more looking at the mental aspect of our athletes, keeping them in the present. Forget about the last play. Don't worry about the play coming. Get what information you need now. And then when they have an issue, a lot of times, they won't come to a trainer. They'll come. They know where I'm standing because I'm on the mat with special teams. I have all my equipment, my floss bands. I have everything, right there. And they come lay down, and we work on them. They go back in.
Well, and for the final thing, you're 61 years old. I respect that because I'm 66. But you seem to have the enthusiasm and energy of somebody half your age. How much time you got left?
I mean, the reason why I've never stopped sprinting my whole life. Sprinting feels good to my body. Yes. Like, I love sprinting. I love plyometrics. I love lifting, but it's just I love to go and I love doing sprint work. And so I've never stopped. I mean, since 8 years old, I've never stopped sprinting. And so that's why I can still run almost as fast as a lot of my college guys.
It's like the fountain of youth, right?
Yeah. I mean, so it just, like, running distance is so painful to me. It's like monotonous. I get so sore if I run 2 or 3 miles, like just crazy sore. I can sprint all day. I can run stadiums all day, and it doesn't even faze me. But I just, I think it is because the human body is meant to move. And I think as we age, people quit moving. Like, I forgot what it's sports science. I forgot the guy's name, but he tweeted after when I posted, I filmed it, and showed the Broward, he goes, Kurt, after 28 years old, I think he said, humans don't ever sprint ever again, for the most part. They never run ever again. That's, I think that's why I still can still do it. I can still move. I still run around. I still I'm not going to be that older coach who sits in the office and just, he's the icon guy and then he gets fired because he doesn't do anything. I'm on the field. I put cleats on. I take control of all the speed stuff. I let my coaches work harder in the weight room, but I put cleats on and I work with our guys nonstop on the field. I just have that a little bit different mentality than most coaches. Most coaches aren't comfortable doing they can't do anything technical because they're just 6'5", 300 pounds, and they can't move. Or they're like yoked up linebacker guys who are so stiff. If they ran, they'd pull something. I mean, I won't hire a guy who can't move. Like, if you look at my staff, I'm 5'8". Kevin McAdams is the only, he played in the NFL at safety, and so he's 218. He's the biggest guy on the staff. Ben's 5'6", 160. It's I get smart guys who can move and who can technically coach. Most free staff I want somebody who can yell, somebody who has energy, and somebody who's 6'8" and can be intimidating. Now, I have never had ever in my life, no matter where I've coached, LSU, Tulane, Louisiana Tech, University of Houston, Southeastern Louisiana State, where athletes didn't respect me and athletes didn't respect my knowledge. I never have to yell at, I truly rarely have to yell at anybody because they're in tune to what we do. They understand that we're going to get better with every workout. So it's, I've never had to, I think football coaches have to have this super aggressive, who just yell to scare guys. And then after 6 months of these dudes, they're like, these guys are idiots. I'm not getting any better. It's so I know when I walked into Houston, they're like, what's this little 5'8" white dude with glasses going to do? And then I put on cleats, took off running. They're like, ooh, this is a little different. And they were bought in within day 3. I had guys come in the office, coach, because I told them, I said, give me a week. I said, I'm not asking you to trust me right now. Give me a week, and I guarantee you, I'll deliver, and you'll trust me. 3 days, the leaders of the team came to me and said, Coach, you got our trust. Just do what you do.
That's the perfect ending. I think this podcast is going to break the internet. There's going to be a lot of people that love to hear this kind of stuff.
I really hate it.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Kurt, thank you so much, and we will be in touch. Thank you.
Before we wrap up, we want to thank Titan Sports, the presenting partner of Sprint-Based Football. Titan helps coaches complete the picture of athlete performance by turning GPS data into clear, coach-ready feedback so staffs can manage workload, reinforce accountability, and know when athletes are truly ready to compete. If you're serious about aligning training, practice, and readiness, Titan is a tool worth exploring. The link to Titan is in the description. And if this conversation with Kurt Hester challenged the way you think about strength, speed, and preparation, we've created a way to continue learning from him. The Coaching Coordinator AI Strength and Conditioning Insight Companion is built entirely from the 3 podcast episodes we recorded with Kurt, along with a full clinic presentation he delivered for our community. It's designed to help coaches revisit his thinking, ask better questions, and apply his principles within their own programs without speculation or outside interpretation. You can learn more and use this as well as see an example on coachingcoordinator.com, and the link to the AI companion is in the show notes. That's going to do it for this episode of Sprint-Based Football and this selection from our Best of 2025 series.
The high-octane phenomenon, Sisu Road to Revenge, comes home with a bang. It's an insane ride and an adrenaline-filled action epic. Critics are raving with an explosive 96% score and certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, saying it's the action spectacular of the year, with some of the craziest fight set pieces ever put to screen. Don't miss the ultimate adventure. Get it now on Prime Video, Apple TV, or Fandango at Home. Rated R.